What is up? Happy Monday. Welcome into the show. You're watching Philadelphia 76ers now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. And coming up, we're going to get to the freshest injury news for the Philadelphia 76ers and the Miami Heat going into Wednesday's play-in game. First, beat the Heat. That is the motto for Sixers fans worldwide who watch this show. That is the motto in Philadelphia. If you want the Sixers to take down Jimmy Butler and Miami, type F Miami in the chat. They get it all good in South Beach, weather good all the time, a lot of money. They're not gritty like we are in Philadelphia. F Miami. And speaking of this game, myself, producer Chip, gonna be live on Wednesday night for it. 30-minute pregame show. Then once the game gets underway with the tip, we are going to do a watch party. Live play-by-play, audience interaction, taking down some beers with all of our loyal viewers. If you're not going to the game, this is the best place to experience the game outside of being at the actual game at the Wells Fargo Center. Sixers injury report. Let's start off with that. Joel Embiid did practice today. Knee injury. D'Anthony Melton still dealing with that bothersome back. Robert Covington, I don't think we're going to see him again in a Sixers uniform. Knee injury, and then KJ Martin with the toe. With Joel Embiid, did miss the regular season finale in that dominant win against the Brooklyn Nets. Of course, Glenn Rivers didn't want to face the 76ers in the first round, so he tried to duck the Sixers, and through that game, he should be investigated by the NBA. Sixers, despite that long win streak to round out the regular season, still have to play in the play-in tournament. What a joke. But even though Embiid did not play in the regular season finale, he was on the practice floor in Camden, New Jersey, where the Allen Iverson statue did go up on Friday. And according to Nick Nurse, Embiid's absence on Sunday was just out of precaution. I like it. You didn't need him to play against the shorthanded Nets. Really, all you worried about was Cam Thomas going off and Mikal Bridges getting some buckets against the team that drafted him and should have never traded him away. You got to keep that knee right. And with the procedure that he underwent, the stabilization of that knee, from everything that I've heard from some doctors that I've talked to, doctors I've seen on social media, he didn't go like with a full repair, so the instability of that knee can cause some problems. That's part of the reason why he's wearing that bulky brace. Here's a direct quote from the 76ers head coach. Listen, he did everything at practice on Saturday. We just decided, out of caution, to hold him out. He will be ready to go. The Sixers, 7-0 since Embiid returned from injury. In totality, an 8-game winning streak going into the play-in tournament. And since returning, this guy is so special. You just wish that he was able to stay healthy a little bit longer and more consistently, because he comes off that knee surgery. He does not play for 2 months. Game 1, he plays 30 minutes in that win against OKC. And in his 5 games back, 30.5 points per game, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 49.5% from the field, 48% from three-point range. His trainer, Drew Hanlon, taking the X to say this, and it's something that I don't think is getting talked about enough, because Embiid did play less than 50 games, and the casuals think that he's been a little bit more injured than he actually has. Has he been injured a lot? For sure, but people act as though he misses so much time. Over the last few years, he really hasn't, but Hanlon spent some facts here, had one of his best seasons of all time, 34.7 points per game, 11 boards, 5.5 dimes, almost 2 blocks, 53% from the field nearly, 39% from the three-point arc, 88% from the free throw line. I think that's one of the more underrated aspects of his game. He averaged over a point per minute this year. The Sixers, 31-8 when he played, 22 consecutive 30-plus point games, including that 70-point banger earlier in the year against, the San Antonio Spurs. It feels like it was so long ago at this point, because the Sixers, without Embiid, were one of the worst teams in the NBA when he was sidelined with that knee. When I think about the MVP conversation, if you took a player away from the team, what would they be? The Sixers, without Embiid, one of the worst teams. With Embiid, 31-8. As Drew Hanlon said, and I imagine he's going to be sitting courtside for some of these games. So what say you, more or less than 31.5 points for Embiid against the Heat. On yesterday's show, we talked about how he struggled a little bit against Bam Adebayo, who isn't afraid to get physical. He's so long, he causes some problems. Type M for more or L for less. Coming up next, more Sixers and Heat injury news to get to. Don't go anywhere. Please continue to hang out here with us, the best Sixers show right here on YouTube. But let's tell you about today's sponsor. That is PrizePicks. And let's tell you about the #1 daily fantasy sports app in North America and the most used daily fantasy sports app in North America. They make DFS so easy where you can pick 2 or more players. You choose more or less on the projected stat lines, and you can win big-time money. $100 deposit match available at prizepicks.com/CLNS. Use our link down below, which I just read out to you, for that deal to apply. And the prize picks that we like going into some NBA play-in tournament basketball, LeBron James more than 43.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Zion Williamson more than 29.5 points and assists. DeMar DeRozan more than 30.5 points, and then Steph Curry more than 24.5 points. We're a part of the More Gang. Win big money, withdraw your winnings, pick more, pick less with PrizePicks today. It's prizepicks.com/CLNS. Good news on Joel Embiid. There is bad news on DeAnthony Melton. He comes back and you're thinking, okay, he looked okay in that return to the lineup, coming off that ailing back. And then yesterday does not play. Nick Nurse says it's not good. And then he did not practice on Monday. That is not good. Nick Nurse on his two-way guard. I've always had concerns with him. I think it's a tough deal. It's kind of the second time that we've gone through holding him out, trying to treat him, getting him to a place where he thinks he can play. He played a couple of games, and he went out again for a long stretch. We bring him back. He plays one game, and then he's out again. I just think it's very difficult. I think we're in the same situation. They're going to continue to treat him, try to get him better. We're hoping for a long run here, so there's always still time as this goes to get him back and to have him be a factor in this thing. But it is concerning. I would imagine 2 things. One, he has probably a bit of a journey to get there for Wednesday for the play-in tournament. Some things have to go well, and 2, hasn't played much. So it's not time to be working guys back into the fold, right? But as a series goes on, if we're fortunate enough to get into one, and as time goes on, you just never know. Chip, we have been pessimistic about this. We've had negative feelings about this. We have not felt good about this injury going all the way back to January because, look, I don't care if you're a professional athlete, if you're a common folk out there, back injuries kind of always spell disaster.
And it sucks because he's only 25 years old and he's already dealing with these back injuries. I just feel so bad for Melton because he really is a player that can have a real impact in a playoff series. His two-way ability, his athleticism, he gets in those passing lanes. We saw in his first game back, he clearly wasn't quite what he was, but he was still in the passing lanes and getting steals and getting shots up. It sucks. I was holding an outside hope that he'd be able to come back and make an impact, but at this point with Melton, because the back injury, it just seems to keep on coming back and bothering him after he plays a couple of games. I don't really have any confidence that he's going to be able to come back. And even if he does play, I don't really see how he can make much of an impact if he is on the court at this point. I think you're just going to be relying on Maxey, Lowry, probably more Cameron Payne now. Maybe Ricky Council gets some extra minutes. We'll see. But I just don't see Melton really being a factor at this point with this injury.
And Nick Nurse makes a good point. We're in the midst of a playoff series. That is not the time to be working somebody back into the lineup who's rusty, who isn't feeling all that good with that back injury. It messes with our rotation. You do that in the midst of a series against the Boston Celtics. If, God forbid, you're that 8 seed or you end up playing the New York Knicks, it's just really tough to do as a coach, but also as a team to kind of assimilate and really get it together as a grouping for a basketball unit. As for Robert Covington, we called this so long ago. He is done for the season. And look, I'm not happy that he's done. I'm not proud of us for calling it. But look, we looked ahead. We foresaw this happening. We kept getting the updates from Nick Nurse. Nothing new. He's not back yet. And we just said, look, it's just going to be impossible for him to come back for the same reasons that Nick Nurse literally just talked about, where when you're in a playoff series, You're not just going to insert a guy who hasn't played in months, who has to knock off that rust. That could cost you a basketball game. That could cost you a couple of possessions, where momentum flips, where the ball goes the other way. That leads to a crucial basket. Here's what Nick Nurse had to say about Rocco, the process legend and process great. He just hasn't made enough progress. We did get him on the court a couple of times last week, just hasn't made enough progress in being able to move well enough without the pain. So that knee injury, going to hold him back here. Rocco, done for the year. And I think that's fine. And frankly, I'd rather see a rookie council get some minutes as compared to Robert Covington. I'd rather continue to see this lineup really get that continuity together. And we saw what that lineup is most likely going to be in the second to last game of the regular season against the Orlando Magic, when we saw Tobias Harris at the 4. We saw Kelly Oubre in that starting 5 with Kyle Lowry, with Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid.
Yeah, and, at the beginning of the season, I would have liked to see Covington out there. I thought he had a decent start to the year, and his skill set certainly would be valuable, but because of the emergence of someone like Kelly Oubre, who's been way better than the Sixers could have ever hoped for when they signed him for the minimum, because you have Batum, you have Tobias, you have some of these other wings that can step in and play. We'll talk about KJ Martin in a second, who has had his moments. I don't think missing him will be as big of an impact, but I do just wish we could have gotten to see him in his return back to Philly fully healthy and playing, man. Obviously a fan favorite. I love Rocco. Again, I think his skill set could have been useful as a 3-and-D wing, but just couldn't stay healthy. That knee injury since December just never got better. It's very, very weird. And, is what it is. Hope he gets healthy. We'll see what the future holds for him regarding his future with the team, but they're going to be moving forward without him. So
yeah, that 3-and-D role that you were talking about, that's what we talked about at the start of that trade. It's like you get that nice skill set, a guy who can knock down some threes from time to time, not the player that he once was, right? But he can play defense, he can hit a couple of threes. That role pretty valuable for what the Sixers were looking for at that time. But the emergence of Kelly Oubre Jr. has really made you forget about not having DeAnthony Melton, not having a Robert Covington. Of course, you'd like to have Melton back because that's a valuable player for a playoff rotation given the two-way impact. KJ Martin, back of the bench type of rotational piece for Philadelphia. He too participating in practice today as well. He certainly gives you a little bit of bounce coming off the bench. You're winning big, you're down big, you put him into the game. Defensively, last year we saw Daniel House come in the game a couple of times against the Boston Celtics. He played a big role. KJ Martin can kind of fulfill that role a little bit. Not consistent minutes, but from time to time, depending on the matchup, depending on the flow of the game, outcome of the game, you can put him into the game. Heat injuries. Terry Rozier dealing with a little bit of a neck ailment. Duncan Robinson back. And then Kevin Love dealing with an arm injury. We'll start off with Terry Rozier. He's getting more tests on his neck. Eric Spoelstra and the Heat are cautiously optimistic. This was their big blue chip type of trade acquisition. They didn't go for Damian Lillard, who would have been the real needle mover. They went with that step below Terry Rozier. It was a big trade for them, and he's a solid player, good offensive player with a little bit of wiggle here. Stats with Miami, 31 games played, been a productive player, 16 points per, 42% from the field, 37% from three-point range against the Sixers on April 4th. When Philadelphia got that big dub, 22 points, 2 assists, 7 of 20 from the floor, 6 of 13. He did kill Philadelphia when he played with Boston in the playoffs many moons ago. But that shiftiness, he can get hot. He can score at all three levels. That's the type of player that if you sleep on, he can give you some trouble. He can give you some problems in a do-or-die, one big game type of showing here. Rozier could be an X factor for Miami. There's no doubt about that. Good shot maker, ability off the dribble. With that aforementioned wiggle, he can create for himself and in turn sometimes create for his teammates. Get to the cup is a pretty good finisher there. Duncan Robinson did miss the last 4 games of the season because of a back. He also missed 5 games in March with a similar injury. A sharpshooter who, it's so funny to see his career trajectory where he was kind of out of the rotation the last 2 years and then put in the playoff rotation, ended up playing very well for Miami in some really big spots. You know what he's going to do. He's going to chuck a lot of threes, take a lot of threes. He's actually added to his bounce game. Like, he can put the ball on the floor at least a little bit. He was back in the rotation this year for Eric Spoelstra, averaged 13 points per game, and the shooting number is very good. That's obviously his strength. 45% from the deck, 39.5% from three-point range. If the Heat do not have Duncan Robinson, that's a big element of their offense who's off the floor for an offense that is extremely limited and bottom third in the NBA. His spacing can certainly change the game. And then Kevin Love, he left Sunday's game with a stinger, looked to be in pretty significant pain. This is a player who's dealt with a lot of injuries, has been known to be tough throughout his career. I'd be surprised if he missed a game of this magnitude. Obviously, this goes without saying, not the player that he was with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's not the player that he even was with LeBron James on that Cavs team that won the NBA championship, who was a focal point as part of the core of those Cavs teams that made it to the NBA Finals on numerous occasions. But he can rebound. His outlet passing, go-ahead passing ability is some of the best that you'll ever see. And we'll rebound it. We'll score it a little bit. He can also knock down the three from time to time. So as of right now, Rozier, Robinson, Love, all expected to play Wednesday night. Philadelphia 76ers, Miami Heat in the NBA play-in tournament. Let's round out with this. Your confidence level that the Sixers can beat the Heat. Beat the Heat. Scale it for me from 1 to 10 down in the comment section. As always, thanks for watching the show. Producer Chip crushing it. Make sure you subscribe.